Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Now, honestly, I don't think I have any housekeeping to really say, so let's just get right into the news. The first news story is a very interesting one. The Department of Justice has actually moved forward to prosecute the president of Colombia because they are claiming that Gustavo Petro is in league with drug traffickers. And I think the situation has actually gotten way more escalated because if I remember correctly, there was another news story where where Gustavo Petro has at least claimed that Ecuador has literally attacked Colombia. Now here's the big thing. This is a complete lie. Gustavo Petro is not in league with the drug traffickers, evidenced by the fact that the drug traffickers have tried to kill him multiple times, one during a presidential race, and one literally this year. So clearly, that's not the actual reason why they're doing a criminal trial against him. Here's the real reason. Colombia is holding a presidential election in 2026, and Gustavo Petro's candidate has been overwhelmingly seen as the victor of the election. Literally overwhelmingly. Literally, I've just looked at the polls right now. He's basically wiping the floor with all the candidates. The only person who is, I guess, technically an opposition candidate is a guy by name of Abelardo de la Esperia, who is the far-right candidate. And, I'm going to take a wild guess and say that he's probably the one that the United States is bankrolling right now. Meanwhile, the United States has a pedophile who is literally, according to basically every single member of Congress at this point, openly just obviously a pedophile. Literally, basically every single Democratic politician who said that they've read the Epstein files has basically said there is basically irrefutable proof that Donald Trump has raped children, and there's literally just nothing being done about it. When the criminals are the ones who get to decide the laws, what do you think is going to happen? Hashtag hands off Colombia. Let's move on to the next story. And it's a interesting news story about foreign copyright and artificial intelligence. Because apparently the UK decided to be really stupid when it came to their AI policies, and only recently have they actually started changing their mind to be somewhat normal. Okay, so apparently the United Kingdom government, their original position was allowing AI companies to use copyrighted works to train their models with an opt-out option. Literally, the way it worked is that they basically, they basically legalized copyright infringement unless you explicitly said no. They literally just said, de facto copyright infringement is legal, which on one end you might say based, but again, it's specifically for AI companies. This is the problem and this is the big thesis that I really need to make this a point. The reason why AI and the copyright stuff is weird is that it's just I don't give a shit about the whole intellectual property theft in regards to AI art at all. The only problem that I have is that they're trying to again redefine copyright law. Well, not even necessarily redefine it, but keep up the segregation that the United States copyright law, or copyright law in general, has. Copyright law has always been segregated. I explained it in my Why Copyright is Worthless video. It was Mead Canyon, he gets punished for posting a video that has literally no full-on basically has nothing truly copyrightable in the video itself. He gets punished by Warner Brothers for doing that. But Warner Brothers can take the audio from Charlie the Unicorn, not credit them at all, and they do not get punished. Again, Meat Canyon, he gets his video taken down, and in some cases, these creators can have their, can literally be sued. To bring up a person that a lot of people don't like, H3H3 was almost sued out of oblivion because of his, the way he made his videos. But again, the reverse, where's the lawsuit against Warner Brothers? If this is, again, an open shut case for that. Especially, again, when literally AI companies just flat out admit they pirate the books. That they just admit that they pirate all the stuff that they take. They don't buy it. They literally pirate it. But again, it's again segregated. Sam Altman is allowed to pirate like thousands of online papers about scientific subjects, but Aaron Swartz takes a couple of them, and all of a sudden they sue him into suicide. Meanwhile, Sam Altman walks. And it's the same thing with this. They were just literally just saying like, okay, full on allowed copyright infringement for these AI companies. Because again, we're at that point where AI is basically like, I mean, look, guys, the truth of the matter is the AI bubble is coming. Like the AI bubble popping. It's gonna happen at one point. It's gonna happen at one point. The fact of the matter is it will pop. What happens after it pops is a different story. Because realistically, at this point, the most likely scenario is that they're just going to be bailed out. But there's not much else for me to say. I have a video kind of divulging on that topic a little later in the year. I don't know. Like it'll be a little later. It won't be next month. It'll be like the month after that, I think. Because I have a different copyright video that I want to do this month. Because it's a funnier one. But anyways, with that out of the way, the next story. And it's an interesting one. It's because it's going to be an interesting discussion about because Scotland recently like killed a bill. You know, ironic that I use that term with the bill's subject. The bill is called Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults. And it's going to be touches on the very obvious touchy subject of assisted suicide. It failing 69 to 57. And the reason why is because Scotland a lot of like areas in like the I think it's like Scotland and Ireland have these like strange like ish not necessarily strange but like I guess like, you know, we saw a little bit about that in the most recent election in regards to like the Scottish National Party's leader, where it was like there's these like strange divides in like certain culture war issues. Because a lot of people in like, you know, general like liberal democracies and like especially European liberal democracies seem to have like this sort of like tradition of like politics where, you know, they live like, you know, comfortably middle class. So, you know, naturally some of the issues are a lot more like focused on like, you know, the comfortable middle classes politics. So even to an extent, they kind of have like a more like not necessarily socially conservative, I guess. I guess I like de facto socially conservative, and sometimes they get even more explicitly socially conservative, but there's just a lot more like, I guess, hesitancy in certain regards. And this one kind of dealt with that, and even to the point where parties, like basically every single party in Scotland made the decision for this bill, like specifically like there would not be any party lines, I don't think. Yeah, I just checked. It was like they literally just all stated there would be no like, because like they would like, if you wanted to vote, they basically, every single party basically just said, if you want to vote for it, vote for it. If you want to vote against it, vote against it. Vote your conscience, not like a party line. Because this bill is a very touchy subject for a lot of people. Because that's a big thing. Like, I mean, especially, I mean, I guess you could say like, I mean, to most people, it's not necessarily that big, but like, to me, as an atheist, it is technically a big deal. Because, you know, death is finality. It is truly finite. Like, when you die, you die. You do not get a do-over. You don't get to go to a magic happy place. You cease to exist. And most people understand that, you know, suicide is not typically a good thing. But then we also have to acknowledge, you know, the concept of, you know, terminally ill people who are already going to die and possibly will have to suffer up until their death. Do we not give them the if they're already dying anyways, why do they not give them the option to go out in a more peaceful manner? And that's sort of like part of the debate and discussion in regards to this type of legislation. And I mean, to an extent, like, I understand that it's a bit of a touchy subject, even like, you know, because I generally have like my perspective for a long time has basically just been a broadly, you know, libertarian perspective in that sense, you know, your body, your choice. So ultimately, if you make the choice and you're mentally fit to do that choice, and I can't really see any major reason why they should not be able, like, but I also am like, because I also want to do everything in my power to make sure that they, like, it's like, you got to understand fully 100%. And one of the big things I also want to do is, like, because I'm a very loud and proud, atheist, and I want to make sure, like, like, just so you know, dude, there is no Jesus, there is no God. When this goes in you don't go to the magic pearly gates. You cease to exist. You do not go to heaven. You do not go to hell. You do not go to anywhere. You die. You cease to exist. I want you to understand that as well. And there was even like a little bit of a weird thing where it's like, there was like, it's going to be a weird thing, a Rob Schneider tweet that came out where it was related to a different assisted suicide thing in Canada. And he probably lied about a lot of the stuff, but this is the thing. When I quote tweeted it, it was a funny thing because it was like, again, giving my sort of perspective on the assisted suicide thing. So basically, Rob Schneider, he tweeted out something about how, like, in Canada, depression can be fatal. Canada no longer has a 10-day waiting period for thinking about killing yourself. Now they have same-day euthanasia. What a fucked up country. And it's like, on a first glance, it's already fucking a failure because it's just like literally, this is my full response. I tweeted this out. I was like, this is the dumbest shit that the fact that people take this man seriously as a pundit is an indictment on the right. In Canada, depression can be fatal, as opposed to the totally safe and not fatal version of depression in the United States. If someone is so depressed that they are going to kill themselves, they are not going to drive to an office an hour or so away to have someone else do it. They do it themselves. Not even getting into the fact that I'm like 99% sure Canada does not offer this to depressed people. This service, if at all real, is more than likely offered to the terminally ill, which can be a complicated issue, but considering Rob's the same guy who says that people should have the choice to take their vaccine, not take vaccines, because it's their body, their choice, it's an odd limit. Because again, that's the thing, if your belief system in regards to medicine is my body, my choice, why do you not then allow this choice to extend further? But then there was someone who actually responded, and they tried to give like a somewhat nuanced explanation, not necessarily somewhat new. Like, I mean, they were still coming at from a quote-unquote right-wing perspective, but they were doing it in a way that was also actually explained in a left-wing sphere. Like, Jeremy Corbyn actually voted against a terminally ill suicide bill in the United Kingdom proper, because of a similar reason that they brought up. And they were like, basically they were explaining, like, what about people who are down on their economic luck and, like, they're depressed and then they think about killing themselves and want to go for a more humane way of killing themselves. And my response was very simple. Why not address the concerns that would lead to someone to want to do that, rather than simply taking away this service to people who would genuinely need it? I noticed that that's not the route that they always want to go towards. Like it's the same thing with like the abortion issue. They want to, like, it's like, how, like, I mean, they want to take away this medically safe, medically good procedure that people need to function, and they want to take that away, and, like, rather than doing anything to alleviate the problem at its core, things like poverty, things like, crime, things like that kind of stuff. You want to address the act, you want to just take away the service from people because you want to have control over people's bodies. And that was a very terrible segue, but Cesar Chavez got canceled because he, turns out, was a rapist and a pedophile, I think? Yes, because his victim was 13 years old. And basically the reason why this story kind of like truly like took off was for a couple of reasons. And the initial victim that came forward, like, basically they were going to build a road in honor of Cesar Chavez, like, I guess for those who don't know who Cesar Chavez is, which is probably very few of you, but, like, Cesar Chavez was a prominent Hispanic American, like, Latino farm workers, like, person. Basically, he founded the United Farm Workers and was basically like a large figurehead for that movement. And what ended up happening was, of course, apparently he used his position in power in these movements to be a little more handsy. And what happened was that, Cesar Chavez Day, I think, is coming up. I think it's coming up because they're going to hold celebrations about it later in the year. But then, like, I mean, because, again, this is how I got an understanding of the story. But, like, first of all, this came forward. Like, she, went to news organizations to explain her story. And then news organizations started slowly, like, going to news or other, like, these pro-Cesar Chavez organizations and saying, like, you maybe want to cancel those events that you guys want to have because we're about to release a massive bombshell story, and I guess it's actually the slightly good thing that happened from like that, because I was a little bit miffed that, you know, they weren't telling us the story initially, and then they weren't, because they basically had the story ready, and then they were like going around and telling people like behind the scenes first. But I guess that makes sense, because like, you know, they don't want to like release this new story and then let these people like, oh wait, we have to all cancel. They're giving them preemptive time to cancel their events. And one big thing that was even more damning was the fact that after this initial story broke, then Dolores Huerta, who was the other major figure of the United Farm Workers, announced that she too was sexually abused by Cesar Chavez, and that she had actually been keeping this quiet for so long because Cesar Chavez was such a prominent figure in the movement that she didn't want to tear the movement down by tearing him down. And now there's a big thing that people want to point out, like, you know, these are all, you know, these are allegations. These aren't quote unquote, like, I guess definitively proven. I guess you can like look at the Cesar, like, I mean, because again, like the title of the article is Cesar Chavez, a civil rights icon, is accused of abusing girls for years. But then they also say, like in the blurb, you know, the NY Times did an investigation and they found evidence. Basically, the investigation is like going through, like, you know, like they're going through, like, they went through a ton of emails, they went through a ton of, like, you know, interviews, they interviewed a ton of other people who are affiliated, who are in the circles with these people, and they basically, like, connected the dots that were, like, you know, it'd say, like, I was, you know, this happened this day, and we were doing this movement on this day, and it's like, we can corroborate these two were at the same place at the same time in that area, blah, like, you know, that kind of stuff. I'll actually link this one, I'll link this Cesar Chavez article, because I'm pretty sure, because, you know, this is a bit more than, you know, I can probably give information on. And, you know, some people went to, you know, try to be like, oh, you know, fuck cancel culture, blah, blah, blah. Why are all these allegations coming out now? And then it's like, but the article literally says why they're coming out now. She's, you know, been traumatized by the fact that she was going to have her road next to her house be fucking named after the guy who raped her. Some rightoids try to do this thing where it's like, why are all the civil rights icons such a bad pieces of shit? And then they link stories that are just not true. Like they say, like they'll bring up like Cesar Chavez raped women, and then they'll also say Martin Luther King Jr. cheated on his wife and he raped people. It's like, that is not at all true. What are you talking about? And then some try to do the thing where it's like, well, I guess if we gotta rename all these Cesar Chavez places, then why don't we rename them about like Abraham Lincoln or blah 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 or George Washington? Like, and then it's like most of the organizations, like, I mean, and then there was also like a brief thing where like some people were trying to say something on the lines of like, we already have the perfect name, Dolores Huerta. And then everybody, like, that almost ended immediately quick, because like all the major organizations who were affiliated with this movement at the time were saying that the best course of action for them would be to change the names of most of these places to like, I forget the exact one. It was like farm workers, like, you know, farm laborers. Like, basically, they're just going to change the names to be, like, more generic, remember? Like, I mean, yeah, it was like Cesar Chavez Day. It's like, it's going to be renamed to, like, National Farm Workers Day. Yeah, I literally just checked. It's going to be, like, Cesar Chavez Day, which is the 31st of March. So, yeah, this new story definitely broke at just the right time. Is going to be renamed to National Farm Workers Day. I mean, there's not much else for me to say, to be honest. I guess you might say, like, well, you're Hispanic. What are your thoughts? It's like, I mean, to be honest, I didn't really fuck with Cesar Chavez that much, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure he did a lot of good, I mean, yeah, he did good things, obviously, you know, but it's like, I saw a tweet where it was explaining, like, yeah, that's just, you understand this about a lot of historical figures. They're men, but, like, we were, like, most of us were sold, like, the, like, Walmart version of the Cesar Chavez story, where he's like this great man who did all this great stuff and like did this all blah blah blah, like that kind of stuff. But it's like, he's a man with flaws, and you know, he definitely has flaws. Obviously, I mean, we just got big evidence of his flaws right now. It's similar to a lot of other historical or prominent political figures in the past. You know, John Conyers. John Conyers, he was the guy who led the charge for Medicare for All. The Medicare for All bill that exists now would not exist without John Conyers, without him and his contributions to the thing. He was also a simp for the, like, you know, corporations that ran the media industry, and also was a rapist. we can acknowledge the good things that he did and also acknowledge the fact that he's not a saint. That is why it's just like, yeah, this is also a good thing to like just not name these movements or like these days after like these figures. At this point, we don't need that. We don't need, like, these are again men, vehicles for the movements, not the representatives of the movements themselves. Anyways, let's just move on to the next story. This is an interesting story that I wanted to cover because it's like just a little interesting. So Joe Kent, the person who was one of the counterterrorism officials in the United States, cabinet, has announced that he has resigned due to the Iran war. It's basically representative of like the current quote unquote like MAGA divide. Because, again, if you remember, like, the MAGA movement is very complicated because on one end it has full-blown neocons and on the other end it has, like, isolationists. And Joe Kent was one of those, like, crazy people. Like, he's a really fucking insane... Like, he was endorsed by Nick Fuentes and then he touted Nick Fuentes' endorsement publicly and then they had to remind him, dude, he's a Nazi. And he's like, oh, well, I'm not endorsed. I don't like Nick Fuentes. And then they had to, like, Nick Fuentes would be like, I hate this fucker. Like, that's just how insane it is. That's just the weird thing about like the fucking like right-wing movement in America nowadays. Because like it's just like you're all just different brands of Nazis. It's just so fucking weird. But like literally, Joe Kent, he posted like a letter where it just said like, I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war with Iran. And then he said Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. And very quickly, Tulsi Gabbard decided to do her name backwards and slut for the Donald Trump administration by basically saying like, look, Iran did pose a threat to us, after saying for years they did not. And it turns out there is even more controversy because apparently Joe Kent has been facing an investigation by the FBI for allegedly leaking classified information. And it's been going on for several months prior to his resignation. And almost immediately, Joe Kent, did what every single person in the MAGA movement who leaves a prominent political job does. They immediately rush to the fucking, like... But this is the dumbest thing I fucking hate about the fucking, like... Because these MAGA guys, these guys want to be podcasters so bad. That's what happened with Dan Bongino, or whatever. Like, he was like, yeah, I'm going to be part of the fucking, like it's the, what is it? I forgot what his fucking job was in the intelligence agencies, but he was like, I'm going to be part of the intelligence agencies. And then he quits and becomes a podcaster, and then the first thing he does is he starts complaining about like what the intelligence agencies are doing. I was like, bro, you were literally in the position to change the legislation. Same with Joe Kent. Joe Kent's like, oh man, we're like, the Israeli lobby is like really hard pressed and controlling of the United States' politics, man. That's crazy. And it's like, if only you were in a position where you could have actually done anything about it. And that's the thing. It's just like, and that's one of the big things that some people are doing. Like, because, like, some people are going around and, posting Joe Kent and saying, like, oh, Joe Kent, blah, 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 blah. Like, like saying whatever. I think even Bernie posted to it. It was like, me and Joe Kent do not agree on a lot of things. But we do agree that the Israeli lobby is doing a lot of bad things. And the Iran was not a threat to the American people. It's like, yeah. Because there's also, like, this one movement where some people want to point out that there is obviously some layer of... this is a complicated one, but like people want to point out how there is some layer of technically anti-Semitism in what Joe Kent said, because Joe Kent blames what happened in Iran on the Israeli lobby, and this is the big thing that like people are still trying to they're not able to wrap their heads around the fact the United States and Israel on a geopolitical sphere are one and the same. There's no, oh, we wanted to do this, but Israel wanted to do this. No, that did not exist. U.S. and Israel, we're lockstep in the same boat. We both want the same things. Israel is not puppeteering the United States. In fact, technically, it's more the opposite. Israel, as a modern-day state, is created by the United States, by the West. They do our bidding. That's why Dems, throughout the entirety of the 2024 primary process, were literally saying, Biden, all you gotta do is make one phone call and everything is gone. They don't seem to grasp their heads around the possibility that the elite of all of the nations want the same goals. The elite and the powerful people in Washington, D.C. want the same geopolitical goals as the people of Israel. Geopolitical goals of the government of Israel. They want the same things. They mutually benefit. That's why the like partnership and like friendship exists. There's a mutual benefit on both sides. And Kent doing this sort of bullshit is, again, also trying to do another big thing. It's the common theory that we have been seeing time and time again with the Trump administration. Good Tsar, bad boyers. You see, his letter, he doesn't blame Trump for this. He paints Trump as if he's like some naive tool for Israel. Like Israel was just working its magic through him. That's actually also a Nazi philosophy, actually. Nazis legitimately believed, like a lot of Nazis, they genuinely believed that there was like some mystical force that was forcing them to do what they did. It was their way to kind of like psych themselves out when they felt regret in the future. It's like, oh, if it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. And that's another big thing about the right-wing movement in regards to like blaming Israel for this. They're blaming Israel for this because they want Trump to walk out scot-free. Like, I mean, whether they be people who are directly MAGA people or people who just don't want to, like, because, like, all of the right wing in the modern day of America is tied to Donald Trump. It is. There is no such thing as an anti-Trump right wing movement. There is, it's called the Democratic Party. But aside from that, there is no right wing movement that is an antithesis to Trump. The right wing, for the past 10 years of this country, has had its entire dialogue focused on Donald Trump. And that's terrible unless they actually go through with the plan of rigging elections. That's why, again, they keep talking about rigging the elections. Trump 2028, rigging the midterms. That's why they keep talking about this stuff. Because it's their only way they're going to win. There is no movement beyond Donald Trump. There is no movement. Like, there is literally no movement. Literally, none. There is no movement. Like, they wanted to just have Pence be the next guy, but Pence turned his back on him. So, I guess you can't use Pence. How about J.D. Vance, right? Oh, wait, no. Nobody likes J.D. Vance. Because, you know, he was an anti-Trump Republican for like 15 million years and then magically is now pro-Trump. Okay, we got Tulsi Gabbard to slut herself out for us. How about her? You guys are going to vote for a woman of color? Rats. Marco Rubio, right? Oh, no, wait. Marco Rubio's been a neocon that we've been rallying against for like 5 million years. And now all of a sudden we're pretending that he's on our side? Huh, that's weird. Ted Cruz? What, Ted Cruz sucks? How about any of Trump's children? Nah, they all suck too. There is no movement beyond it. And that's the thing. That's why they still want to have Trump be not culpable. And I'm not buying it. No, he's not culpable. They want to do the thing where it's like, oh, he has dementia now. It's like, there's some people who literally try to do the thing where it's like, he has dementia now. And it's like, bro, I don't care if he has dementia. He's been an active participant for this whole time. He's been an active participant this entire time. And it's the same thing like the Epstein blackmail thing. It's like, no, he wasn't blackmailed by Epstein. He wanted to do this. He wanted to do it. He wanted to fuck the kids. That's what he wanted to do. And he wanted to kill the kids in Iran because he wanted to do that too. I don't care if he has, quote unquote, Jesus Christ in his ears. That doesn't matter. And no, Joe Kent's not going to get passed. Because this is what he's trying to do. He's trying to get it passed. Like, now that he's out, he wants to be able to be like, hey, guys, so when you guys are going to start arresting people, I'm cool, right? Nope, Joe, that's not how it works, buddy. Not a single MAGA Republican will ever face the normal life again. Whether they be socially ostracized in the future, or if they've been an active participant in this, like, the shitty things, oh boy. If there was a just world, oh boy, the punishments would be bad. But, you know, that's not going to happen. We live in a liberal democracy, and Democrats are too limp-dick to do anything. So, you know, probably not going to happen. I mean, considering we literally had Donald Trump literally try to overthrow the United States government, and somehow he got to be able to run that government afterwards in a liberal democracy, clearly that ain't working. And speaking of not working, the Illinois election results. We're going to be going over the results of the federal elections that happened in Illinois. Or why I say Illinois? It's Illinois. I guess that's the one weird random thing that some people do. But anyways, Illinois, they had a couple of elections, and we're going to be going over the federal elections there, because these are the ones I was paying attention to. We're only going to go over the ones I was paying attention to. I guess, okay, we're going to go over one that I was not paying attention to, just because I want to mention, like, something that happened. But, like, anyways, let's just get into it. First, Illinois District 3, Delia Ramirez won. No surprise there, obviously. Shout out to my homegirl. I don't care what the AI bots are trying to do. You're number one, you're G. I hope reactionaries are still mad about the AI psyop that happened, that they fell for. And one of the most hotly contested races in this one is Illinois District 4. Primary was fucking intense, dude. I was sitting at the edge of my seat the whole time. It was a nail biter through and through. But Patty Garcia just barely managed to squeak by. It's just so... It was just such a... I was sweating the whole night, bro. That was insane. Realistically, yeah, Patty Garcia won because she was the only fucking candidate running. Hope Byron Sigcho Lopez kicks her ass to the curb. The one race that I was not paying attention to was Illinois District 16, where an allegedly pro-Palestine candidate won the seat. Granted, he ran unopposed for this seat, similar to the other two that I mentioned, but also, there's one weird thing. I can't find a single thing of him saying he's pro-Palestine. I've looked. His website doesn't have anything. His Twitter doesn't have anything. I can't find anything. The only thing that says that he's pro-Palestine is that there's one specific online group, you know the one I'm talking about, that has been endlessly touting him out as like this massive, like super pro-Palestine guy. And we'll name drop them a little bit later because there's a little bit more to say about them in other races. Next races that are, you know, these are like I should mention these are the races that they didn't really have much to do. Morgan Cargill lost in Illinois 10, no surprise there. Dylan Blaha lost in Illinois District 13, no surprise there. Illinois District 6, Joey Rusevich lost his race, no surprise there. And Illinois District 5, Matt Conroy lost, and it's not too surprising, but there is one small thing that makes it slightly surprising to me, to an extent. Not enough to actually change the results of the race, but it's just one thing I just thought would be interesting to mention. So, if Democratic voters were smart and were paying attention, maybe this could have changed the results of the race, but for some reason, I guess they just didn't want to, and I guess that's just the theme of Illinois. They weren't paying attention. But in 2022, Chuy Garcia ran for re-election in Illinois District 4, and then 2 days later announced that he would run for Chicago mayor. And that decision was very much denounced by everybody because it's like that's such a very crappy, shitty thing to do. You know, very opportunistic. Like, you know, you just told us that you're going to put all your attention on this specific congressional seat, and then now you're going to focus on this race where, you know, it's just going to be a local race, and now you're saying you're going to put all your attention on Chicago specifically, but also this is going to be very difficult if the Dems don't maintain, because the Dems had a slim majority at the time. Did they have a slim majority at the time? I don't know. They had the numbers were very close, so it's like, yeah, we need everybody on deck. Well, the incumbent of this race, Mike Quigley, just got renominated, and he's been running for Chicago mayor since January. Very interesting, just wanted to point that out. But these next couple races were the ones that were actually, important. These were the 5 races people were actually paying attention to. Illinois District 2, Robert Peters sadly lost. And I had more faith in Robert Peters than other people did. I mean, I think early on he was the front runner, but then as the race got a couple more contenders in the race, you know, I think he started shifting slightly backwards. Specifically after one person entered the race, Jesse Jackson Jr., who was the representative of this district for a long time, but then, you know, I guess people didn't remember, the very shady shenanigans that caused him to resign from the seat initially. Most people recognized him by his name. People were basically speculating that Jesse Jackson Jr. was coming back to the House, especially after Jesse Jackson died. I think most people kind of were like, okay, at this point, yeah, he's probably going to squeak by with that. But somehow, the AIPAC candidate, Donna Miller, won the seat. A big yikesy move. In Illinois District 8, Junaid Ahmed lost, and I honestly kind of expected this loss to happen, but at the last second, some people were they were starting, people were starting to pay really close attention to this race, and they started giving a lot of Junaid endorsements, and it's like, okay, this race might actually change the perspective, but no, it didn't really, you know, get involved. To the point where it's just sad. He lost, obviously, but it's even more embarrassing because he lost to the woman who was defeated by Joe fucking Walsh. The next race was Illinois District 7. Now, I was a little hopeful that maybe we could pull a Sheila Cheerfulness McCormick but good with Keena Collins. But in the most realistic sense, it was kind of obvious that LaShawn K. Ford was guaranteed the seat. Like, bro, he was groomed by Danny K. Davis to be the nominee for the seat and was endorsed, like, immediately after Danny K. Davis resigned. Like, I guess technically that's what you're supposed to do in Chicago politics. Like, Danny K. Davis said, I'm not running for re-election, and then immediately endorsed LaShawn K. Ford. He didn't pull, like, the thing where it's like he forced LaShawn K. Ford to be, like, the nominee or whatever, but he endorsed him when it was, like, he endorsed him. Like, that's what happened. Now, I remember liking LaShawn K. Ford a little bit ago. He endorsed Bernie in 2016, and in 2019, when he ran for Chicago mayor, he had a pro-universal healthcare platform. But this race, he's kind of removed every single, like, explicit reference to policies on his site. Like, literally, he has a thing on his site where it's like, he launches the plan of, like, Project 2029, and then I looked at it, and it's just like, this is nothing. This is just platitudes. These are not policies. Like, Project 2025, like, this is a weird thing. Like, libs and, like, fucking, like, Dems are trying to do desperately. They're trying to be like, we're gonna launch our own Project 2025. But then it's like, you look at all of their Project 2025s, it's like, there is no policy. The reason why Project 2025 was big is because, like, literally it was like the Heritage Foundation literally was like, we have, like, this is explicit policy. We want you to do this. 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 That's what Project 2025 was. You guys are launching, like, vague pledges like, we are going to, like, help, like, the people. It's like, bro, give me, like, an actual policy you want. However, I will mention that Danny K. Davis did sign a pro-Palestinian letter in the Illinois State Congress that stated, quote, "We will not be able to achieve peace when millions of Palestinians are denied basic human rights. We urge the United States and the international community to work towards long-term solutions to that end, to end the equality that as the root cause of all the violence," which was released on October 8th of 2023, which was signed by people like Robert Peters, Karina Villa, and Rachel Ventura. But AIPAC seemed to be very happy that Keena lost and was saying that they were willing to work with LaShawn K. Ford. So, you know, there was a little bit of a concern there. But there's also another bit of a concern that a lot of people have to theorize in regards to this race. And it's Track AIPAC. Not necessarily them specifically, but they are kind of, unfortunately, emblematic of the problem of this race because of an action that they did. In Illinois District 7, they explicitly endorsed Keena Collins, Annabelle Mendoza, and Reed Showalter. Explicitly endorsed, because Track AIPAC, they now do endorsements. Like, I mean, they can't just be a thing that monitors the amount of Israeli money that politicians get. They have to now endorse and back candidates and raise money for candidates now. And due to this fact, they have an endorsement page on the website. And they try-endorsed those 3 candidates. Now, to play devil's advocate, if we were to take the vote totals of those 3 candidates and another pro-Palestinian candidate named Anthony Driver Jr. and combine them together, you would get over 28,000 votes, which is more votes than LaShawn Ford had. I know we can't necessarily, guarantee the fact that those votes would coalesce together, but it's just people, looking at it and trying to figure out an answer. And another race that kind of shows this issue is Illinois District 9, where Kat Abu-Ghazaleh lost. She did get a close second, but second place is not first. The AIPAC candidate did get third, and Daniel Biss did win. Daniel Biss won. And I've seen a lot of people, try to say, Daniel Biss is good on basically everything but Israel, so I think it's like, look, if you want to say, yeah, the worst candidate didn't win, fine. You could say that. That's one thing. If you want to say the bad candidate, the really bad candidate lost, whatever. But then going on to say that to try and defend Biss is kind of a little bit of a problem. First of all, Daniel Biss thanked J Street for that win. Like, he explicitly said when he went to his, like, victory, he's like, this victory belongs to J Street. It's like, yeah. The problem was very specifically that AIPAC was endorsing candidates, not the fact that the PACs were, like, endorsing candidates and, like, bankrolling candidates. That wasn't the problem. Like, you're starting to see where the issue is, right? Like, I mean, is the issue specific PACs are donating, or is the issue overall that PACs are donating at all? And also, when he very explicitly backs this PAC, it's like, this PAC is owed this victory. How can we then trust this guy to then also be, like, a super anti-PAC guy? Like, I mean, if he's good on every other issue except for Palestine, then, like, I mean, does that count for campaign finance reform? Because he's thanking a political action committee for donating money for his bid. That's a bit of a yikesy. So, clearly he's not at least some... I mean, I don't know. I don't know his full extent on the platform. I know he was, like, the quote-unquote progressive choice against J.B. Pritzker, but, like, he kind of immediately, like, raises a red flag when it's like, hey, my vice lieutenant governor candidate is going to be Carlos Ramirez Rosa. What's that? He said that Palestinian children deserve to live? I will change my candidate now. But also, this is a problem that when you guys say that, like, well, he's good on every other issue except for Israel. You wanna know who else used to be good on every other issue except for Israel? Richie Torres. When Richie Torres got elected, he was literally being touted as one of the next members of the squad. Literally. Like, again, he was endorsed by, like, I mean, he wasn't endorsed by Bernie, but he endorsed Bernie. He was like, he was a part of the progressive movement. He was a member of the, he was like one of the more progressive members of the caucus of his, like, not necessarily of, like at least on the state level, he was at one point a pretty left-wing member. Even when he first got elected, like, literally, he was like, well, I mean, I'm basically with you on a lot of these issues, except for Israel. I think blah, 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 blah. That was his one thing. And that quickly rotted to him becoming what he is today. It's like Riley's Law, but for that. Like, I mean, for to know what Riley's Law is, it's basically like a law in regards to, it's a new term that is coined about the internet, where it's like, if a person starts tweeting open transphobia, they don't tweet about anything else normal ever again, because their entire identity becomes consumed with transphobia. It's the same thing with Israel. Like, Dems used to be like, you know, they could be like at one point normal, but at this day and age, your choices for Israel are literally be pro-Israel or be normal. Those are your options in this modern day and age. Now, there is one person that has basically gotten all of the blame for this race. Bushra Amiwala, a smaller candidate who claimed to be pro-Palestine, to the point where they were also endorsed by Track AIPAC, alongside Kat. And another, like, guy in the race, Mike Simmons. You notice a pattern? The two races where Track AIPAC really just spread themselves really thin were the races that they got, like, their asses kicked at them? Like, what? Like, on one end, they try to do the spoiler effect where it's like, you know, like, oh, well, if the vote totals of those two candidates were lumped into Kat, you know, that would have won. But, you know, not really, we don't want to, like, necessarily, like, I mean, again, we can't necessarily verify for certain if every single person who was pro-Bushra would have voted for Kat or whatever. Because the one big thing that's been going around is, like, some people are trying to be like, well, Bushra and Kat, they don't like each other at all. And, like, there's a good chance that none of the Bushra voters would have voted for Kat anyways. But it's like, the point isn't that. The point isn't that. Like, I mean, numbers-wise, it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, the numbers-wise, it literally doesn't matter. Because people who are accepting of the spoiler effect, like, mythos, if they believe the spoiler effect, it does not matter if you went to every single Bushra person and said, explicitly said they will never vote for Kat Abu Ghazaleh. It doesn't matter. Because the numbers are going to say, if you add the numbers equal bigger number. But then some people go, like, well, why not call out Mike Simmons? There's a reason why no one's calling out Mike Simmons, and it's the fact that Bushra was literally bankrolled by AIPAC. And literally, that's what happened. Bushra was being fundraised by AIPAC. AIPAC sent out an ad for Bushra. And after that happened, she refused to drop out. And people are trying to be like, well, no, you're not understanding. You know, AIPAC can literally spend money on any candidate they want that are not affiliated with them, and blah, blah, blah. Like, they can do that. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. AIPAC looked at Bushra and said, we can use her as a tool to hurt the pro-Palestinian movement. And Bushra made the decision to continue to be that. Like literally, I tweeted at Bushra, like, the day it happened, where she's made the video, like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to let AIPAC do that. It's like, no, that happened. AIPAC put out the ad. Your choice is to either continue to allow them to use you to do that, or not do that. Like, you're getting shit specifically because you yourself had been tainted and allowed yourself to continue to be tainted. So now, every day for the rest of your life, you're going to be hearing Bushra Hayantun, and for the rest of your life. I probably, butchered that, but you get the, if you know Arabic or whatever, you'll hear, you know what that means. It's Google Translate for Bushra is a traitor. I thought about getting Google Translate to say way more, but that's no. Again, it doesn't matter. It literally does not matter the intentions of Bushra. What matters is what Bushra did. Bushra, it doesn't matter if Bushra came in with all these good intentions or whatever. She was used by AIPAC as a tool to hurt the pro-Palestine movement. She was. That is a fact. If I was in Bushra's shoes, the second that I learned that the AIPAC ad comes out, I would have immediately, I would not have immediately just dropped it. I would have been on the 988 hotline, because that's how, no. The fact that I would even allow myself to be in the position where AIPAC is using me as a tool to hurt the pro-Palestinian movement is just fucking insane. And some people have tried to claim and, say, the left is divided, but it's that's not really true. The second AIPAC, the second that AIPAC ad came out, it became obviously the true candidate for the cause of Palestine was. Afterwards we were too nice there. We were trying to be Bushra, you got that ad from Palestine, you got that ad from AIPAC. Can you please, for the goodness of the Palestinian movement, could you drop out? No. We should have been fucking mean to her. We should not have been nicer. We should have been comparing her to the Palestinians who sell out their own people to the IDF. That's what we should have fucking done. Is that fucking mean? Absolutely. Yes, it's mean. But I don't fucking care. In the grand scheme of things, the anti-Israel candidate lost, pro-Israel candidate won. That's what happened. That is what happened because of Bushra. Bushra allowed her. Again, it doesn't even matter if we can verify. All the people who voted for Bushra would never voted for Cat. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that. It matters what you were used for as a tool. It's the same thing. Drop the whole notion of the two good candidates line. I don't fucking care. In a race, we do not live in New York City where we are all running for mayor. That's not how it works. In an election, there are two candidates. You could say, but there are three candidates. No. This is the thing. There are two types of candidates in a race, especially for us, for left-wingers. There are good candidates, and there's the enemy. Those are the only two. Those are the only two options. Want a movement where every single person is important? Go join a fucking union. Go join an activist movement. Go direct action. Genuinely. That is where it is. In an electoral sphere, one person versus another person. That's how it works. I love Larry Lessig. You all know. I love Larry Lessig. But for 2 months in 2015, he was essentially the devil incarnate. Because it was him versus Bernie. If you're a political organization that's actually trying to run candidates, you can't do the whole, there are two wonderful candidates in the race. No. Track AIPAC. I'm glad to call you out. Track AIPAC. You guys, if you're going to be an actual political organization who wants to run campaigns and stuff and fundraise for candidates, you have to actually get your shit together. Look, again, if you just want to be the fucking, organization that posts the fucking, graphics of, this candidate takes $270 trillion from the Israeli lobby. If you want to do that, gladly do that. But now you're, fundraising money, you're bankrolling candidates and stuff. It's now you gotta be a little bit more, actually smart. And while we're on this subject, can we finally decide if J Street is the good guys or not? Because you guys do that all the time. I know Track AIPAC, they've said it 15 trillion times. J Street, blah, blah, blah. Guys, just say it. Just pick one. Is J Street good or not? Because you get called out every fucking day when this happens, where it's you have the green graphic for Bernie Sanders, and no, he takes money from J Street, but then you have the evil red graphic for Daniel Biss. He's gross for taking J Street money. Oh, Bernie Sanders, amazing. And yeah, cool, you add the little thing at the bottom where it's this one is specifically only talking about AIPAC funding. It's yeah, but again, you're going to be called out every fucking day for this. Especially when you don't give the red graphic for Bernie. You guys don't even have a red graphic for Bernie, I don't think. Because again, you've labeled him as the green. He's green. He's the green one. Now, if you want to acknowledge the fact that he's a good candidate, yes, you can say that. But you also Like, again, just pick what you want to do moving forward. Because clearly the way you're doing things now is just not really doing so hot. I mean, again, you guys were good when you were the graphics candidates who would spam every single fucking, like, congressional person. Like, you guys are great at that. But when it comes to actually, like, doing, like, the actual political organizing thing, maybe you guys should sit this one out. Oh, yeah, and last important race is the Illinois Senate race. You know, I basically near the middle, I checked Robin Kelly, even though I hadn't really supported her House bids. I saw that she was, like, back in, like, the Block the Bombs Act and, like, a couple of other, like, propulsing things, and, you know, I was like, yeah, you know, she'll be cool. She was polling third, so it was, like, gonna be, like, a Barbara Lee situation all over again, where the good candidate never wins. But she lost as was expected, you know, she was basically polling third the whole race, and J.B. Pritzker basically bought the fucking, like, race for Julia Stratton, and a lot of people were trying to be like, well, at least, well, she's pretty good too, but it's like, all the AIPAC people backed her behind the scenes, so I don't know why you guys are saying that she's good. But anyways, with that out of the way, let us move on to the main topic of this video. The 2026 Peruvian election. It's happening on April 12th, so I got some time to, like, go over some of the things that are interesting about the Peruvian political scene. And if you know anything about the Peruvian political scene, you know that they've had, at the very least, an interesting 10 years. But if you know anything about that, you should know that those 10 years were negated by a lot of other interesting history. And let's go over some of it. Now, the interestingness of Peruvian politics really got hot around the 1980s, where there was a massive economic downturn in the nation. Poverty rose up to 55%, there was hyperinflation, food shortages, you know, all the standard stuff. And sometimes people protested against all these bad conditions. And, as is typical with protest movements, the government was not happy and decided to launch movements against the protesters. And with the harsh oppression by the Peruvian government at the time, it led to some people to think we have to fight back, which led to the rise of an organization known as the Shining Path, a guerrilla militia who espouses the ideology of its founder, Presidente Gonzalo, which is basically a form of Marxism-Leninism-Maoism that centers Gonzalo on being the fourth face, the coveted spot on the graphic that everybody wants. And the Shining Path became very interesting and known for its very controversial tactics in regards to its guerrilla warfare against the Peruvian government. And, like, especially because their preferred methods included targeting civilians, trade unionists, and other leftists who did not agree with them, and it got very bloody very fast, with up to 70,000 people dying, and that's, like, I mean, just at an addendum, that is for the entire conflict, which went all the way up to 2000. I couldn't find exact numbers about up to, like, you know, a certain point before that, but it was very obvious that people were not necessarily happy, and they got a little antsy. So they decided to express their concerns through voting, and they decided to shift to a very specific direction in that election. A direction that will be very much obvious to most people. And in 1990, a man by the name of Alberto Fujimori was elected president of Peru. But the incumbent party prior to him still had control of the National Assembly, so there was some divide on how to approach the crisis that Peru was facing. And that's when Alberto was let in on a little secret by the Peruvian armed forces. You see, the Peruvian army was actually planning to overthrow the previous president to instill a neoliberal dictatorship, but their plan just so happened to coincide with the presidential election. So then when Fujimori got elected, they basically just told him, hey, you want to help us, like, legitimize what's going on? And in return, you get to be the guy in charge? And then Fujimori was like, yes! And as such, they launched a self-coup in 1992, and implemented something called Plan Verde, which dissolved the Congress, led to the quick launch of neoliberal economic policies in the nation, had the government take control of the media, and launched the mass sterilization of 300,000 indigenous people. While the plan officially ended that year, and democracy returned for another election, it's generally accepted that the following couple of terms that he did were more than likely done by electoral fraud, and was basically just a public face to make the military dictatorship not look as bad on the world scene. Like how the military dictatorship in Brazil had elections where they had an official party and then the bad party, and the basically legitimized a one-party state in Mexico for a long time, which also wasn't helped by the fact that Fujimori took his position as the figurehead really bad, like really massive, launching a lot of propaganda to not only make himself basically like a god, but also demonize anybody who opposed him, usually by comparing them to the Shining Path, which he did inevitably, take care of, but basically that led to Fujimori launching, basically a political cult surrounding himself. And, much like how a lot of people in the modern day want to launch political cults around themselves, he thought maybe that this political cult could extend him to run for an unconstitutional third term. And that led to basically every single lie that Fujimori had been telling for years to be exposed, including but not limited to the fact that he claimed that he was an anti-corruption candidate and yet was massively corrupt, which led to Fujimori fleeing for his homeland of Japan and being removed from the office of presidency and later arrested in 2005. And spoiler alert, he would die in 2024. Fujimori is very interesting to explain modern-day Peruvian politics, because despite the fact that, this story of him ended, the Fujimorist propaganda seemed to work really well, as he is the primary ideological father of the Peruvian right wing. The immediate post-Fujimori era of Peru was kind of seen as the defining nature of how we're going to move past the Fujimori era, and for the most part, the next couple of presidents didn't really have that much to say. So I'll just do a quick rundown of a couple of these guys, the three guys that came afterwards. Alejandro Toledo was elected first, who was liberal in this. He was a liberal who was better in the sense that he was not a dictator. Otherwise, nobody really cared. Then there was Alan Garcia, who was a former president who was slightly to Toledo's left, but was later caught up in corruption scandals and killed himself. Not during his presidency, but that happened afterwards. The most maverick president of that time period was Ollanta Humala, a guy who basically ran on, "I will be Hugo Chavez for Peru." But then when he got into office, he basically governed no different than Toledo or Garcia. And these three probably not living up to the expectations of a lot of people is more than likely what led to the 2016 era, where Peru has basically begun its most recent game of politics. First came when a man named Pedro Pablo Kuczynski being elected over Keiko Fujimori, the daughter of Alberto. But her party ended up winning 73 out of 130 of the seats in Congress. So they had an absolute majority. And despite the fact that PPK, as he would be referred to, was overwhelmingly supported by the people who hated Fujimorism, he was forced to make major concessions to the Fujimorists, otherwise they'd sabotage his administration every step of the way. And that they did, especially when he gave them fuel for the fire, such as admitting he was implicated in Operation Car Wash. So, after an impeachment was attempted and almost passed because the left was also in favor of impeaching him due to corruption reasons, PPK was scared and went to his advisors to try and be like, how the fuck am I going to make sure that a future impeachment will fail? And one of his advisors told him very simply, maybe if you give the Fujimorists what they want the most, then they might let you go and they might let you govern as a president. So PPK made the decision that he would pardon Alberto Fujimori. His claim being that the reason why was that he wanted to do it for altruistic reasons. He's an old man, we don't want him to die in prison. But the problem was, outside of the Fujimorist cult, a lot of Peruvians wanted him to die in prison. And here's what's worse about it. It didn't work. And there was another impeachment inquiry launched against him. So PPK decided that he wanted to make the impeachment go away. So he went to the same advisor who told him to pardon Alberto Fujimori and said, dude, how are we going to get this done? And he's like, don't worry, I got you, bro. And so he went to pay off a legislature to not impeach PPK. But then that was caught and was reported in the media, and PPK almost immediately resigned to avoid further scandal. Now that's also really bad, but there is one thing I neglected to mention. The name of the advisor of PPK that kept giving him this shitty advice. Kenji Fujimori. No, it is not a coincidence. He was the son of Alberto and brother of Keiko. And this whole ploy was by Kenji to basically assert his own, he wanted to show that he was more powerful than Keiko because he was in the administration and actually doing a lot of pulling the strings, but that didn't even work. So it was just fucking stupid all the way around. But now that PPK was out, now came Martin Vizcarra, who was basically known as the COVID president, as his administration was basically just handling the COVID-19 pandemic. And naturally, he clashed with the Fujimorists, particularly on how he wanted to approach issues not necessarily related to COVID itself, but around other issues like corruption. And much like with PPK, they expected a big back and forth about how this was going to go. But Vizcarra was actually very poignant and gave them one simple demand. If you guys do not like me, and there is no chance that we are going to reach an agreement on this policies, then I want you to call a vote of no confidence in my administration so that I can schedule elections immediately so that Peru can finally have a government that works. But for some reason, the Fujimorists didn't want to do that. Maybe because if they did, they'd have to face re-election bids of their own. Huh, interesting. So Vizcarra decided to just push for the process himself and dissolve Congress and call for snap elections immediately. And the Congress tried to stop this from happening by declaring his presidency invalid and tried to put a person named Mercedes Arauz in the administration. But since Martin had actually followed the rules, they had actually had to follow the law. And a new Congress was elected. And since he did it through that process, they are the ones who had to get reelected, not him. And despite the Fujimorists losing, there was still impeachment inquiries that were launched against him, due to accusations of corruption on his front by the left-wing parties. And the Fujimorists were very happy to lend their votes to that cause, because either way, Vizcarra is gone. And after 2 impeachment trials, he was out. But this is when Peruvians started to feel like something's not right. And they felt what happened with PPK, they were fine with. But this one was okay, guys, I think this is getting a little bit much. Because they're this one seemed a little bit more unfair. So they started launching protests against the government because they felt that these impeachment inquiries were a little too much. Protests that had to be handled by the interim president, Manuel Merino. Because by virtue of being the new president, he basically was the face of what they hated. And many saw his ascension as a coup and a power grab by his party. 94% of Peruvians at the time did not think he should have been president at all. The one big thing that he tried to do to assure people this is going to be fine was basically say, guys, I'm not going to stay here forever. Making it known that he was quickly scheduling new elections in 2021 for everybody, for the Congress and for the presidency. But people were still mad and protested him like crazy. And after 2 people died in the protests, he very quickly resigned so that he could not be implicated in their deaths, lasting a total of 5 days as president. And he was succeeded by a man by the name of Francisco Sagasti. And it was basically the same story for him, but, but it was slightly longer. He was meant to be a centrist placeholder on the spot until a new election could happen. And while there was still some opposition to him, it was muted because the elections were kind of what drew people's attention more and more. Especially when the runoff had Keiko Fujimori in it. So Peruvians looked at the person who was running against her and took a gamble and elected a man by the name of Pedro Castillo. Castillo was a very interesting choice in this race because nobody saw him as the guy who would make it to the runoff. Keiko wasn't guaranteed the runoff either, but she was generally polling in the top 4 of the whole time. Castillo was the leader of a teacher strike that happened within a fringe, who was running with a fringe political party at the time. So, he just so happened to be at the right place at the right time. Literally what happened was basically, people were just, tired of, the established political parties of Peru at the time, and he just so happened to eke out. But there was a lot of things that were weird about his campaign. Again, he was a fringe candidate. So, when he did certain fringe things at the time, it made sense because he was a fringe party. But now that he was running in the general election, let me explain it like this. Because, as I mentioned before, with a lot of, the Peruvian left, there's been a lot of, things about it. Comparisons to the Shining Path and, even though people who are not Shining Path affiliated, people like Ollanta Humala, they basically become neolib shills. Then we also have accusations the Peruvian left basically helped the Fujimoris impeach 2 presidents. So people are a little bit concerned about that front too. So basically, Castillo, he was, again, when he started out, he was just part of a fringe party that nobody thought would be any notable. But now he is not only the candidate of the left, but he is also the candidate in the general election against Fujimori. So it's what happens now? And that's when we started seeing one of the most interesting general election pivots in history, where despite the fact that he was running with a Marxist-Leninist party, he ran a bid where he said, quote, "I deny that we have any thoughts of Chavismo and communism," in reference to his Marxist-Leninist party, alongside him being a pretty reactionary guy. Early on, there was some hope for his administration. His prime minister was pretty left-wing, but he had to go because he was also the same guy who stated, quote, "The country was in a disastrous state in 1980. Some Peruvians took the wrong path," in reference to the Shining Path. So Castillo had to start shifting rightward to appeal to the Fujimorists. Now remember, this was a guy who already made a general election pivot from being a Marxist-Leninist to being I'm not really a communist per se. So now he was just shifting rightward and rightward to the point where he was literally becoming buddy and buddy with Jair Bolsonaro. So it's yeah, this is ooh. But I was kind of I was a little suspect of him when he was first made to the general election, but it's he kind of just proved my point. Now again, you could also point out the fact the Fujimorists were not going to give him a chance to even do anything remotely good. But again, it just kind of seems he was already making the pivot before he even had to consider the Fujimorists feelings. So yeah, and shockingly, the Fujimorists wanted to impeach him. And while they were on their way to impeach him a third time, Pedro Castillo would launch a self-coup in order to stop them, stating that Congress had obstructed him and the whole time he was in office, and that they had effectively become a congressional dictatorship. And this was almost ended immediately, and Pedro Castillo had a seemingly valid reason to impeach him. So he was impeached, and now the next candidate came, Dina Boluarte, his vice president, who succeeded him. Now, she was not popular among anybody. The Fujimorists hated her for obvious reasons. She was on a ticket against the Fujimorists, and, her party had already turned against her and Pedro Castillo long ago, and the few Castillo loyalists that remained didn't like her because she sold out Castillo and became the president, instead of fighting for him to remain the president. And as such, she has literally no base in Peru. Which is probably why she decided to stick around as long as she should, longer than she should have, claiming that she basically claimed for a long time she was going to call a election at some point, but it was always planned for some time in the future. Ultimately, they did finally squeeze out her saying that they was going to schedule an election on April 12th, but they had to drag that out of her a lot. In the meantime, she was sending the police out in the streets to attack like anybody who was protesting against her. Mostly against the indigenous community, she killed 69 people and injured almost 2,000. She was also implicated in multiple corruption scandals after she made a televised address where she was wearing a Rolex. The Western world even decided to turn it into a slight game because Dina's approval rating had dropped so low that people were wondering if she was ever going to get to the point where she would hit a 0% approval rating. But she only managed to get around 1%. And all these things combined led to a impeachment trial. She tried to push back, but ultimately it was held late last year, where she refused to even show up to defend herself because it was pretty obvious what was going to happen. And I actually don't know if it was going to be that obvious, but after she did not show up, it became clear that there was no other option except for them to unanimously agree to oust her. And the next candidate is Jose Sherry, who was chosen, he was chosen to succeed her. And almost immediately this panned out bad because it turns out that he was a corrupt rapist. So soon he was censured and removed from the office for the presidency after 4 months, to be replaced by Jose Maria Balcazar. I covered it in a news story when his ascension happened. He's the one that wanted to fuck kids. Okay, that's a slight joke. There is no evidence that he himself wants to fuck children, but while defending a child marriage law, he did say that teacher and student relationships were a thing that people should do, so he's a very suspect person. But anyways, with all that out of the way, the actual election that we're facing now, that's what led to the election now. And yeah, that's a lot of stuff that happened. So let's not waste time and go over the parties/candidates. There are 33 candidates running for the presidency of Peru right now. We're not going to go over all of them, obviously. Even if I were to go over the ones that would probably get above 1% and or at least somewhat notable, it'd leave us with 20. So instead, I'm going to go over broadly 11 candidacies that give you a broad understanding of the Peruvian political scene. These ones are also generally, these are ones that are generally accepted to be of course these are the ones that are generally accepted to be the ones that are probably the most likely to win. But there's also some that you'll see what I mean when I get into them. Alright, so first candidate is a man by the name of Mario Vizcarra, an engineer and brother to former President Martin Vizcarra. He is running for the Peru First Party, a social liberal anti-authoritarian party. Now, he's been charged with embezzlement alongside his brother and was almost forbidden from running because originally Martin was, this is what was supposed to happen. Martin was the one who wanted to run for office in this election, but with Mario as his running mate. But they said Martin couldn't run. So then Mario said, hey, what if I run? And then he tried to run and they said, I don't know about that. You're also guilty of embezzlement. But then they decided that, no. I mean, they basically ruled that since he is trying to rehabilitate himself and he did not commit any of these crimes when he was a presidential candidate or in office, technically this would be an infringement of his political rights to not allow him to run. The next candidate is a man by the name of Roberto Sanchez. He is a congressman and former member of the Castillo cabinet, running with the Together for Peru party, the mainstream left-wing party of Peru, primarily influenced by the ideology of philosopher Jose Carlos Maria Tegue. What makes his campaign interesting is 2 major endorsements that he has received in this election. Endorsement 1 was from Pedro Castillo, possibly due to the fact that Sanchez was an active participant in Castillo's self-coup, calling for journalists, he literally called journalists and told them to put Castillo's message on the airwaves, literally trying to get them to literally spread the news, the coup is coming. But also, he received the endorsement of a man by the name of Arturo Humala. Now, do the name sound familiar? Yes, he is the brother of former President Ollanta. but also he is an interesting figure for a number of reasons. Big one is the fact that he tried to run for president in this race himself under a political party called the National Alliance of Workers, Farmers, University Students, and Reservists. But the interesting thing about that is if you take the name of it in Spanish, and then it's like, I'll just cut to the chase, its abbreviation is Amnaturo. So it's basically a personality cult surrounding himself. But it's very odd because he's also part of a prominent political family, because apparently, Ollanta Humala is not the only one who, the same election that Ollanta Humala ran for president, in the initial time, his brother Ulysses was also running for president. But they all of them are sort of related to the same political movement called the ethno-secessionist movement, which is an ideology that can basically be described as indigenous fascism. It's technically a third positionist ideology, but for all intents and purposes, it's fascist. It's a fascist ideology. Third positionism is just fascism. It's just fascism, but for your specific indigenous group. That's basically it. It's an indigenous fascist movement. It's extremely socially reactionary, and it's literally just take Hitler and then just make it so that instead of Aryans, it's about indigenous people. Look at their flag. It's literally just one half is literally inspired by Hitler, and the other one is literally just the indigenous flag of, indigenous populations in South America. But what is interesting is that he's basically explicitly formed an alliance with the JPP in this election. And he's also taken great pride in this alliance, not just in the sense that, the alliance is there, but also because of a very specific thing that he has, said, during the thing, extremely exemplified by this quote that he has stated in this election. Since I started working with the juntos, all the maricons have left. There aren't any homosexuals left among these people. You may notice that all of the words have been translated to English except for one. But he further goes on to state that since I joined the juntos, gender equality people have no say whatsoever. It is a very macho party. Since Amnaturo Humala has been in power, it is no longer supported and will not be supported in reference to LGBTQ rights. So, yikes. Probably should have known that before I made the fucking, what party I would have supported in, every single country video. Next candidate is a candidate by the name of George Forsyth, the former mayor of La Victoria and a 2021 presidential candidate, running under the We Are Peru party, a party that is Christian democratic and broadly conservative, Forsyth himself identifying as a centrist focused on crime. The next candidate is Vladimir Cerón, a neurosurgeon and former governor of Hunan. He is running under the Free Peru party, a Marxist and socially conservative political party. It used to be Pedro Castillo's party, but Vladimir and Pedro have had a very heated clash ever since Pedro Castillo became president, and he basically was the one who led the charge to get Pedro Castillo kicked out. Cerón and Castillo do share one thing in common, though: criminal convictions. Cerón facing 4 different criminal convictions for corruption, which has led to him to go into hiding for a bit to avoid persecution. But there's enough wiggle room in one of the cases, at least, that allow for sentences to be overturned. However, there is also another funny factoid about this election and him, and it's the fact that there was one organization that asked the very simple question of, do you have, what are your views on this candidate? And they would divide it based on positive and negative. And overall, Cerón is the most hated candidate in the race, with an 80.3 negative view. The next candidate is a man by the name of Wolfgang Grasso, a former general in the Peruvian Air Force. He's running with the Democratic Integrity Party, a new right-wing party in Peru. Now, I know what you're thinking. A member of the military running for president in Latin America with an explicitly right-wing party? That doesn't sound good. And no, it does not, because Grasso has explicitly stated, he's explicitly defended the actions of Dina Boyarte, stated that human rights get in the way of fighting crime, and that has called for Peru to leave all humanitarian organizations around the world. And next candidate is Jose Luna, a member of Congress running with the Podemos Peru party, which is a right-wing populist party. He's also implicated in various amounts of political corruption. Next candidate is Cesar Acuña, who was the 2021 presidential candidate and former governor of La Libertad. He is running with the Alliance for Progress, a right-wing populist and catch-all party, who was originally seen as that was what their ideology was at one point, but ever since Castillo won, the party and him have shifted hard right, teaming up with the Fujimorists, not in a way to claim that they're good, but in a more explicit fact of them acknowledging, yeah, they do suck, and they're bad, and now we're on their side, stating explicitly, I never imagined that I would support or endorse the Fujimori party, but for my country today, I put everything aside. I forget the acts of corruption from the Fujimori era. The next candidate is Carlos Alvarez, a comedian running under the Country for All party, a conservative populist party. He's pitched himself to many people as such. Yo soy de izquierda, de derecha y de centro. I am left, right, and center. Yeah, interesting. So he's basically saying, he's saying it in a different way, but he's basically explaining, not left, not right, forward. That's basically what he's saying. He's also stated that he wants to be the Peruvian Bukele, and has called for the ending of Peru's involvement in the human rights organizations. So, like always, it's not left, not right, forward. It's not left, right. The next candidate is Alfonso López-Chau, an economist and former rector of the National University of Engineering, running with the Now Nation Party, a newer political party that is social democratic and left-wing nationalist. It has become pretty popular in the wake of the Buyate protests, as López-Chau gave refuge to some of the students who were avoiding state violence against them. And the next candidate is a man by the name of Rafael Lopez Aliaga, also known as, and I'm not even kidding, Porky, and that's his official nickname apparently. Third place finisher in 2021 and former mayor of Lima. He's running under the Popular Renewal Party, an ultra-conservative party that on a good day can be described as neo-fascist, and on a bad day can be described as just fascist. Porky has described himself as the Peruvian Bolsonaro. Man, these guys really love to call themselves the Peruvian worst politician ever. And has also mentioned the fact that he is a celibate and maintains his celibacy through daily self-flagellation and, quote, I say to the Virgin Mary, well, you know what? You are prettier than that girl, so I am so in love with the Virgin Mary that she really fills me with peace, fills me with joy, fills me with strength. Oh yeah, and he's also been accused of corruption relating to the Panama Papers. And last, but certainly least, we have Keiko Fujimori, the 3-time presidential candidate and daughter of former Peruvian dictator, running under the Popular Force Party, the Fujimorist Party, broadly, far-right, anti-communist, pro-neoliberal, blah, 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 yeah, that kind of stuff. But I wanted to give another interesting factoid about her and this party and what they wanted to do for this race. Because apparently, despite the fact that she's been leading the Peruvian right wing since 2006 at the very least, the second that they could drop her, they were going to, as originally they were planning on actually running Alberto Fujimori in this race. That's how much the personality cult is ingrained into them. They were legitimately going to run Alberto Fujimori, and the only way to prevent that was for him to fucking die. Now let's take a look at some polling for the race. The polls show a massive divide in the candidates. Not just who they want of all the candidates, but also if they want any of the candidates at all, because none and undecided usually vastly outpoll the candidates individually and especially together. People are very clearly not exactly the most happy with the candidates given to them. But excluding that, The candidates that usually make it to the top of the polls are Luna, Asunya, Alvarez, López-Chau, Porky, and Fujimori, with individual swaps between them kind of being there, but either way, the results kind of show just overwhelmingly like, yeah, it's probably going to a runoff, but who will be in the runoff? Well, if we just take a look at the polls, the two candidates that kind of pull the highest are Keiko and Porky. But they have entertained the possibility of many other matchups. Literally we're just gonna go over all the matchups that they have at least entertained. Porky versus Luna. Porky wins with 25 points. Porky versus López-Chau. Porky wins by 26 points. Porky versus Alvarez. They did 3 polls. Alvarez wins 1 poll with 5 points. Porky wins the other 2 by 1 and 13 points. Keiko versus Alvarez. Alvarez wins by 10. And Keiko versus Porky. Porky wins by 6 points and 19 points in both polls. The conclusion is, unfortunately, Porky and Keiko might be the ones that go to a runoff. And I don't know what to say about that runoff, because that runoff is fucking terrible. But I will say this. Currently, I will say, the left, they're not the best options. Let's just take a look at the lefties in the race. On one end, I would have originally at one point said Together for Peru. But then they chose to back a guy that the lefty, backed by all the lefties that failed, and also the fact that they were literally changing their policies to benefit some kind of fucking fascist. On the other hand, you could say that Vladimir Cerrón, because he's a Marxist-Leninist, but he's also cringe and anti-gay. But then on the other hand, there's this other random candidate who was part of the Venceremos coalition, and he looks kind of cool, but he's also, was the guy who, tried to get Castillo out of jail, so there's one thing. But then on the other hand, López-Chau, even though he's the, top polling leftist, he's just a soc dem, kind of like a lib, not like a lib, but like a social democrat. But again, he is winning. So I don't know for round 1. I'll probably put it up to a poll. You guys get to decide who I back in the first round, as if that means anything. I basically just going to pick the one on our campaigns. I'm going to click the button to endorse. But regardless, if any of those guys make it to the second round, I would say vote for them, very obviously. But, I'm not a Peruvian, so I don't know. Maybe you all know better than I do, so, take that what you will. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click that bell to notify when a future video comes out. And if you want more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.